Dear friends, my name is Julia, and on behalf of Cambridge Assessment English, I would like to welcome you to our Proficiency Wednesday, a webinar about preparation for C2 Proficiency exam. If you can hear me well, please put a plus in the chat box. Great, I can see so many pluses. I see participants from different parts of Russia, Kazakhstan, Armenia. Welcome, everybody. Before we start, I'd like to give you some tips for webinar attendees. So it's recommended to use Google Chrome. If you cannot hear or cannot see the video from the presenter or cannot see the slides, please reload the webinar page or reconnect to your internet connection, or type @support in the chat box, and a member of the support team will help you. Please be an active participant, provide feedback and ask questions. Just a reminder, please be sure to type your questions into the question box. There are two sections, chat and question box. So please, type your very special questions in the questions box. And there are lots of questions about certificates of attendance. The recording of the webinar and the certificates of attendance will be shared with you in a couple of days. Okay, great. So in Moscow, it's 3 p.m. And I think we can start. I see that Claire Barnes is already here with us. So I'm uploading the slides. Claire, please go on air. The first session of our webinar, the first presentation, is C2 Proficiency, Productive Skills, the Pitfalls. Speaking and writing at C2 level. Hi, Claire. Can you hear me?
Hi. Yes, I can hear you. In fact, I'm deafened by your dulcet tones.
Sorry.
No.
You can see your slides.
I'm sorry. Yes, I can see my slides. Yes.
Okay, let's start.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that amazing introduction. If I keep getting the messages to say that my internet is unstable, then I may well switch myself off, my camera off, and relieve you of having to look at my face. But we'll see how we get on. Okay, so my name's Claire, as you've probably figured out by now. I'm a teacher and teacher trainer. I've been presenting for Cambridge face-to-face for a number of years now across Moscow, across Russia, and various other places. And we've been online doing this kind of thing since April, I think, April or May. I'm not a great fan of the webinar. I will say this right now, because I think it is too easy for webinar presenters to simply talk for an hour. I'm not going to do that, sorry. So I'm going to ask you at frequent intervals to comment in the chat box that I can see everybody saying hello in, okay? If you have any content questions, as Julia suggested, there is the content question box at the top of your screen, but please talk to me using the chat box at the bottom on the right-hand corner. In the right-hand corner. Okay, so productive skills, the pitfalls. First of all, here's your first chance to stop saying hello and start telling me, who are you? Are you preparing students for C2 Proficiency, or are you preparing yourself? And why? So, okay. Yeah. Excellent news. Don't forget to keep telling me why you're doing this. I mean, okay, if you're that's rather an odd question, is it? Okay. If you're a teacher, then presumably you're doing this because you're being paid to do it, right? But why C2? Why not A2 or A1? If you're preparing to do the exam yourselves, yay! Well done, you. Why? Okay. Yeah, I can see all sorts of answers coming up there. Professional development. Somebody's saying it's fun. Well, of course it's fun. I mean, you know, why would it not? IELTS? Yeah, so I don't quite understand the relevance of IELTS there. But okay. Well done. Right, wonderful. They're very motivated, are they? Well, that's good. That's excellent. Okay, I'm just trying to figure out which of these keys I have to move in order to get my slides. There it was. Yay, just reminding myself how to use this particular platform. So you can see I've changed the slide there, and I've got a question on the slide. I assume you can read. So I'm not going to read the question, but I look forward to your answers. In general, yeah, we're looking at productive skills at the moment, so speaking and writing. What are the challenges, do you think? Okay, writing is a very, very big thing, Christina. What do you mean exactly? Just like physically picking up a pen and actually making contact with the paper? Or writing specific content, or what? Ivan. Yes, precisely. Yeah, good. Okay. Content keeps coming up, ideas keeps coming up, absolutely. Okay. Yeah. All kinds of things. Okay, fair enough. So basically people keep saying, okay, fair enough, I need to develop vocabulary, I need to develop ways of putting things, that's great. Ideas are often the problem, aren't they? Now, the next couple of slides are basically what Cambridge recommends, okay? I'm not going to read through the slides because, well, hey, you can read. As you read quickly, you might want to just write one word which expresses your impressions of these tips. One word as you read them. One word. When you read something like this, what word springs to mind? How do you feel? It's irrelevant. Oh my. Okay. I'll tell those happy people at Cambridge that you said their stuff was irrelevant. If I can find anyone. Yeah. Yeah, I just switched now to the speaking one. Okay, all kinds of things coming out there. Yeah. You feel pleased. Oh, good for you. Okay. Excellent. Okay. Yeah. I thought, frankly, that there's quite a lot in there. And yes, I think some of it is actually quite specific. Some of it is quite useful. But on the other hand, there's a lot to take in. And, you know, what might, you know, if we try to put all of that into action all at the same time, what's going to happen? You know, it's going to be quite confusing. It's too much to think of, and so on and so forth. So I have taken an executive decision for you today, and I have decided that based on experience teaching both C1 and C2, that most of the time the candidates lack confidence because they lack content. And so, as you can see, yeah, it's just blah 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 blah, and they don't actually say anything. They spend a lot of time saying nothing, rather wordily. Yeah, which is a skill in itself. I mean, let's not deny that. Let's remember that actually being able to waffle at length is a very useful skill. Politicians find it extremely useful, for example. But if we're thinking of C2 in terms of an academic career, then perhaps it's not quite so useful. We do need some content, don't we, really? Okay, so basically, as we've said, you have to do all of these things all at the same time, don't we? Yeah, quite frequently. So when you're speaking and when you're thinking about the writing, you have input. If you're speaking, you also have to listen, as well as already be thinking what you're going to say and how you're going to say it. And when you're writing, then you've got to be reading the input there, and you've got to be, again, thinking of what you're going to say, how you're going to write it, and how you're going to organize it. It's quite a lot. And so for many people, the immediate reaction is panic. That's supposed to say panic. Yeah. Okay, so let's try and think of ways to overcome panic, because I don't know how you feel about panic. I find it a very unproductive emotion. People tend to spend a lot of time panicking, a lot of time worrying, and it's not particularly useful. So here we go, people. Here's a statement. Feel free to comment on this statement in the chat box. You've all gone terribly quiet. Yeah, Katerina, I would agree. Sometimes panic can boost the brain, but on the other hand, rather pessimistic, Ivan. I assume that's the comment referring to the music. Okay. Okay, fair enough. I can read all sorts of things here coming through my chat box. Oh, that was a nice one. The binary oppositions are always made. Wow. Okay. Okay. What's wrong with pop? Don't even get me started. Seriously. But still, if you look at the comments, the vast majority of your comments are long or short. They tend to be quite short. And if we think of this first thought as being your gateway to developing the conversation or developing whatever it is you're planning to write. Oh, thank you, Elena. Wow. Yeah, okay, fair enough. Yeah, nice long comment there. Okay, thank you, Lily. A pop fan, that's great. Okay, so we need, I think, to help our students and help ourselves to try and develop a theme. Okay, so what I did with this, and many thanks to anybody out there who helped me with this on Sunday, I created a Padlet screen. Okay, Padlet, I'm sure lots of you know about. It's a wonderful website, also available as an app, where you can encourage people to state their feelings. You can set the whole thing to make it anonymous. Okay, you can use it in class, and you can use it if you're online teaching, like most of us are at the present time. So this is what I put up there. I created, basically I just put it up there, and I shared the link with a number of my friends Sorry about that, guys. And they were very, very helpful. This is some of what they wrote. They wrote quite a lot, in fairness. And what I'd like you to do now, I'd like you to read these comments and tell me in the chat box what you notice about these comments. So just read these comments and tell me what you first noticed about these comments. They're all opinions, yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure that they're irrelevant necessarily. Okay. Now think about it also in terms of how you might respond to some of these comments. Yeah. If you would like to, please choose one comment and write a response to that comment in the chat box. Good point there. Most of them include some kind of argument to support their opinion. Absolutely. Okay, more about agreeing and disagreeing. This is very true, Alina. And how easy is it to continue that conversation? Okay, so please choose one statement and write a reply to that statement in the chat box, please. Yes, Irina says they use contractions. Indeed, they use contractions. That's true. And if we're speaking, then we would naturally use contractions anyway. So I'm not going to whinge about contractions at this stage. Well, you can categorize the opinions. You can rearrange your Padlet in any way, shape, or form. But that's not the point at the moment. At the moment, my point is to generate responses. Yeah. Some of these comments are, well, all of the comments, because they're comments, their opinions essentially are very interesting. I would put it to you, okay, that they don't all necessarily lead to a depth of conversation or discussion that you might actually be hoping for, and this is the problem. Yeah, so it's quite often during speaking tests, and also when people write, they have this idea and then it kind of peters out and they kind of they stop. Okay. We can possibly teach AI. Well, possibly, yes. Oh, thank you, Elena. Okay. Yeah. People are, okay, people are saying, I agree, I disagree, which is fine. But generally, just saying, I agree or disagree, is that going to help us develop the conversation? Yeah. My point is not necessarily, particularly, it's a very sort of B2 sort of thing to say, oh, well, I agree with you, and people then move on in the conversation. But we're here at C2. We should be able to pursue the conversation, to continue the conversation, no matter what, even if we're not actually representing our own opinion. Okay, so I thought for the next Padlet, see, because these comments are wonderful in themselves, but they're a bit limiting. So then I thought, okay, fine, let me change that. Okay, so I also changed the topic. And you can see the green message is my topic. That was what went on to Padlet. And then I also uploaded an example, because now I wanted people to present or to comment in some way on both sides of the argument. And you can see what I've written there, or at least I hope you can see what I've written there. Which language structure did I use to present both sides of the argument? Which language structure can you read there? Yeah, I didn't write on the one hand, but what on the other hand, certainly. And how did I begin? Yeah, it's true that, exactly. So it's true that but on the other hand, that's a very, very basic way of asking or presenting both sides of the argument, okay? And now I'm going to show you some of what they wrote. And I'd like you to, first of all, read them and decide if they all did do just that, as in present both sides of the argument. Okay. I have to say, I wrote to the same people, or I shared the link with the same people. And again, I'm very grateful to those people. And I got a much, much bigger response. Not sure whether that's the topic, or maybe it's because I did ask you, these people, to present both sides of the argument. Thank you for that. Wow, Katerina and Ivan. I was quite impressed. I went away and let them get on with it for a few hours, and people were still actually adding to my Padlet even yesterday, late yesterday. Exactly. It's a much more focused response. Yeah, it's a much more focused response. It's a much some people would say it's much more planned, and possibly it is. But I've got people here thinking exactly how to use the language and how to present two different sides of the argument. And would you agree that it is now much, much easier to comment yourself, to continue that discussion? Yeah, it's a good point there, Alicia saying. Yeah, you're not actually forced to take one side or another. And that's another point that I would make about speaking and writing. Nobody is forcing anybody to come down and present just one side of the argument. We're all about trying to get people to present both sides, because it gives you more language to play with. It gives you more content to play with. And this is the point that we are making today. Okay. If you're working with a group of students, okay, either they comment immediately or they go away and they think about it. You can set the Padlet so that they can then also continue by commenting on each other's comments. That would be the next stage. Okay, and this conversation is happening quite spontaneously, both in the classroom and outside the classroom. It's not just confined to the classroom times. It's not confined to the physical or even the virtual classroom. It's ongoing, isn't it? Yeah. Well, I can see one or two people are making comments, about register and so on and so forth. And that is something that clearly you can then work on, isn't it? But my point is with this, the more you do this, the more you encourage this kind of response, the easier it becomes for people to actually start producing these ideas, to start vocalizing these ideas, either when speaking or when writing. Oksana thinks the topic is more relevant. Well, you never know. It depends. I would suggest on the age group and the people that you're teaching. I know some very passionate 50-year-olds, passionate about pop. Although I'm quite passionate about how much I hate pop. you know, and people are going to talk about it. You can talk, obviously you can use any kind of statement. If you think about the statements that I'm putting up here, thank you, that last comment. If you think about the topics that I'm putting up here, are they blah blah statements, or are they slightly provocative? What do we think? Are they blah blah statements, or are they slightly provocative? Yeah. I think one of the things that many people forget, and teachers, I am blaming you hugely. I think we all tend to forget that if you make statements slightly provocative, if you sort of find something that people are interested in, then you dig and you dig a little more, it's easier for people to respond. It's easier to generate ideas, because it's going to be a topic that they're really going to talk about. Okay. Right. In the exam, of course, do we have time to indulge in this kind of task, this kind of bouncing ideas around? Sorry, Ellen is saying, why do I blame teachers? Well, because you're here for a start. No, because in my experience, a lot of teachers, particularly if they're working with late teens, tend to avoid controversial topics, tend to also recommend that their students avoid controversial topics, or avoid, you know, a lot of teachers find it difficult to generate or to spark interest with the age group. And I think if we're slightly provocative about that, we get them to give us, you know, all these slightly, I'm not saying extreme, but at least different ideas, then it's easier for people to talk about. It's like when you get to write a story at the lower levels, at B1 or B2, and the stories are all about, you know, happy families and happy families having picnics and happy families going, oh dear me, the car has broken down. It's very, very boring. It's not particularly interesting for students. It doesn't like that spark. And I think that's why we need to become a little bit more provocative in what we ask. Exactly. Okay. Broken families. Yeah, you see, Ivan, and that doesn't come up very often. You know, we live in a world where anything up to 50% of any family is going to be broken up at some point for one reason or another, and nobody talks about it. But it's the kind of thing that generates language, it generates ideas, that generates this, encourages people to start talking, to start arguing, and by using Padlet, I'm saying, well, we can do this in writing as well. Again, to get people used to producing this kind of language. Okay. Now, the idea being, of course, that the more we do it in this way, the more we can, the more practice our students get in just simply generating an idea just like that, the more useful it's going to become for our students when they're in the speaking test and in the writing tests. Okay, right. A glass of wine. Yeah, but you know, taking a glass of wine into a speaking test, I believe, is frowned upon for various reasons. Okay. Setting aside the fact that we're all running tests, we're wearing masks at the moment, which makes drinking wine somewhat difficult. Now then, okay, I'm going to move on now, and I'm really going to ask you to join in with the next activity. Does anybody know this book? Speaking Games, published by Jason Anderson a few years ago. It's, I think, a very useful book. It's designed, it's got lots and lots and lots and lots of games in it, designed from anything up from B12 through to C12. And it's published by Delta, which is not one of the larger publishers, which is probably why you've never heard of it, if you haven't ever heard of it. Okay. And a lot of these activities we can adapt. Okay. So this particular one that I like a lot, it's called Secret Sentences, as you can see. It looks curious. That's an interesting statement there. Okay, right. So the idea, the basic task or the basic activity in the book is, okay, you set a topic and you have small groups of students, say 3 or 4 students, and a big pile of these secret sentences, and you set a time limit. So you have a topic, each student chooses a secret sentence, reads it, doesn't actually tell everybody else what it is, and then you start a little bit of a debate or a discussion. You let that run for 3-4 minutes, during which time all of the students have to use the sentence on their piece of paper. Now, and they can get points. They get points if they use their sentence so naturally that nobody notices they've used it. They lose points if they use their sentence and everyone goes, that's such a secret sentence. And I chose this particular game. I'm going to run it with you in just a second, but slightly differently. The problem is that when you get to C1 and C2, you should have a vast range of all sorts of this kind of cohesive device at your fingertips or at your nerve ends or whatever. Unfortunately, we see a lot of people come into the exam and they have a mental list of phrases. And the examiners can see the candidates basically ticking off this mental list as they go. Okay, now is that natural? By the time we get to C2, should we be able to see that mental list? Should we be able to hear or read, if we're thinking about writing, people mentally crossing things off their list? Absolutely not. Thank you, Olga. Unfortunately, it happens again and again and again. So we're trying to make this more natural. Yes, Raoul, I would agree it should be automatic, but should is a very big word, and clearly it doesn't always work. Okay. So I can't run a speaking activity in a webinar, which is another of my many problems with the webinar genre, but I can run a writing activity. Are we in? Are we going to join in? Yeah. Okay. So, thank you. Somebody's asking me about a mental list. We're all teachers, and we all use the course books, and the course books say you must use this, and this. And then people come into the exam with this in their minds. It's not a physical list, it's a mental list. People go, okay, I must use this, I must use this, I must use this. And we teachers are, in fairness, the worst offenders, because we shout at our students so long, say, you didn't say that, you didn't say that, you didn't say that. That's precisely what I mean in terms of this mental list. I want to have that mental list, but I don't want to be able to see that mental list. Yeah. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, I'd like you to read this comment here, this statement. Okay, so we're going to have a debate. Okay, so this is the one person. Okay. Should always make our lessons as up to date as possible, reflect what's happening in the world. We can't escape it, so we might as well accept it. This is the opposing. Okay. I have to say, I'm currently located in Germany, and as you may have heard, there are people in their hundreds and even thousands who join in demonstrations in Berlin and some of the other big cities, saying just, nobody can tell me what to do. Nobody can tell me I must wear a mask. Nobody can tell me I cannot do this and this and this. So it is actually, for most of Western Europe, a very, very relevant debate. Okay. Now you've read the two sides of the argument. Okay, and I've put them on top of this slide for you. What I'd like you to do now, please, I'd like you to read through this list of secret sentences, and I'd like you to choose one for yourself. All right? Well, there's all kinds of rationales surrounding COVID, and different countries have different advice and different recommendations, and so on and so forth. But and I'm not here to resolve that debate. We're not ever going to do that. Okay. Has everyone chosen a secret sentence? Try and make it some kind of statement or a cohesive device that you would not normally use or would not normally think of using. Okay, so I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes, and I'd like you to write a comment in the chat box, and I'd like you to make the comment long enough to naturally include your secret sentence. All right? Okay, so I'll give you a little while to think about that. Okay, I don't care whether you're going to be which particular opinion you're going to have, or which particular opinion you're going to represent. That's up to you. I'm not taking notes, so don't worry about that. But I'd like you to think about what you're going to say, okay? And because we have these secret sentences, is it going to be a short comment or a longer comment? Yeah, it's going to be a longer comment, because the longer your comment is, we've already got the first ones in, yeah? The longer your comment is, the more natural your secret sentence is going to sound, okay? So away you go. Remember to include your secret sentence. Thank you. Yeah, I've got a couple of really nice comments there using Okay, stop shouting at each other. This is not a place to shout it. I want some kind of comment using a secret sentence. Thank you. If you've already put in a comment, can you please now start reading the chat box and write or put a plus in the chat box every time you see a secret sentence. Okay. If you're still writing your comment with the secret sentence, please feel free. Well, yeah, if we're including it, the point being that some people then don't actually notice. Yeah, if you're using it as naturally as possible in a piece of writing, then the idea is that people accept it. It's natural. People don't notice it, and they can, and that's basically what we're looking to achieve. Yeah. Okay. Whoa. Yeah. There are some interesting statements coming up here. Lovely. People, a lot of you are really making a great effort to use some of these secret sentences. Absolutely fabulous. Yes, Jamila, there are some great secret sentences coming through. I quite agree with you there. Yeah, it may be challenging there, but you know, I think at C2 we are perfectly you know, in a great position to challenge our students, to challenge ourselves. Yes, and I think this is one of the points that I would like to make here, that as teachers we do need to keep challenging ourselves, and we should not be asking our students to do anything that we cannot do ourselves. And for that reason, also it's a good idea to possibly join in this kind of debate, be it in writing or in speaking, using whatever, you know, in the classroom or online. But I think if we can't join in ourselves, if we cannot actually produce such language ourselves, then possibly we shouldn't be encouraging our students to do so. Yeah. Okay. Wow. Somebody's there quite vehement about things. Okay. Thank you. Some of the comments that I'm reading are very much comments that we would write and are written in such a manner that, you know, in more formal tones, which is fine. And some of the comments that I've been reading are more things that you would hear people say in a debate. And that's also fine. Obviously, when you're running this kind of activity in the classroom, you have decided ahead of the activity, okay, this is going to be a written debate, or this is going to be a spoken debate, and you need to convey to your students what kind of language you're expecting them to produce. I didn't do that, so I've been reading some interesting comments. Okay, What can we do with this? I mean, okay, this is a finite number of secret sentences that I took straight out of that book, Speaking Games. Does it have to be so finite? Where am I going to get more examples of this kind of language, this kind of secret sentence? Where might I find more examples of language? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, David, you know, the great thing about being a teacher is that you can say anything you want, but none of it is necessarily reflects your opinions. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. All kinds of excellent ideas coming up there. You can, of course, simply start with your course books. I realize that when you get up to C2 level, there are fewer options, but there are still quite a few course books, some of them not specifically to teach proficiency, but at the level. And they tend to come with lots and lots of ideas for sentences, you know, for cohesive devices, and also with examples and so on and so forth. David, your comment went past so fast that I didn't really get much of a chance to read to the end of it. I will go back and start again. But yes, we have lots and lots of sources. So we can all start with whatever materials we're using, whatever materials we have access to. We can expand by using everything around us that we read or listen to in our daily lives. And as teachers, I think that's pretty much what we should be doing. I think it's very easy as teachers to become very insular and to not listen to what's happening around us. But, you know, we have to overcome that. Now, having established, yes, Ilya, a good point. There are some, but not very many. That's the big problem, isn't it? Okay. Now that we've actually done the debate, and we've established where we can get more language like this and so on and so forth, what can we do with it? Because obviously it's not just about production. We do need to get into that, but it's not just about production, is it? It's about also trying to improve. So if you're speaking, if you're running this as a speaking task, either in the classroom or through Zoom or whichever online platform you use, then you can simply record. Obviously, if you're recording, then you need to get your students' permission or at least warn them that you're recording them, and then use that recording to let them see or hear what they're saying, to let them try and to prove on what they're saying. However, if you're running this in writing, and this is where I think it's really, really useful, I have to say this, people write far too little in class or around the class. Because it's in writing, you have an instant record, which you can then offer straight up for editing. Okay, so obviously the first question is always, was that natural? Did you notice that I used this particular cohesive device, this particular turn of phrase, yes or no? If yes, okay, fine. Then I need to make it sound more natural. If you didn't, and the next person then gets the job of trying to use the same piece of language in an equally natural manner. Yes, Maria, that is a very good point. Very, very good point, Maria. And I think as teachers, we're also all guilty, well, as people, we're all guilty of this ourselves. People have a very big passive vocabulary and in general quite a limited active vocabulary. So we're all guilty of actually using the same phrases or the same turn of phrase over and over again. In the classroom, what can we do about this? Well, we can keep using tasks or activities like this where it's, okay, here is something you're going to use this phrase. Okay, and then you get them to listen. Did that person use this phrase? Yes or no? By feeding language like this, you can gradually, it's not going to happen overnight. Let's be honest about this. But you can perhaps in the physical classroom or even online, do something to let the student know, aha, I heard that. So online, for example, you have the emoticons. You can put a thumbs up to indicate to everyone, oh, you've heard something. Aha, okay, right. And then by doing that also, you're trying to encourage the students to listen to each other. Yeah, this is another great thing. We need to listen to each other because that's what we do in real life, or that's what we're supposed to do in real life. Listen to each other so that we can actually improve. Try to vary what we're saying, try to respond in depth to the content that is being mentioned. Yeah. Yes, Maria, yeah, and outcomes is heavy on Lexis. That's one of the things that it's famous for. But you know, we can also do, let's think of other ways of practicing that. Also, you can use word wall, for example. Word wall has a spinning wheel feature that you can use certainly online, but also in the classroom, where they spin the wheel, the wheel gives them a phrase, bang, they have to continue the conversation, for example. Yeah? That kind of thing. Or you can ask them to use specific phrases to ask each other questions. So you have a general statement. You all listen to the general statement. Fine. Now let's write questions. There's another way of doing it. And you have to write questions using whatever language you want them to practice. Okay. I think another problem that we all have as teachers is that we don't revise language. We don't recycle language as much as we should do. Yeah. And yes, I would say that is something that goes back to L1, because in our L1, whatever that is, again, we don't necessarily vary our language as much as we should do. And this is one of the reasons why I keep saying that your average native speaker, with all due respect, is not going to pass proficiency, at least not without a fair amount of practice. And I'm sure there are many of you out there who understand exactly where I'm coming from here. If you're not teaching it, you're not preparing it, you don't think about what you're saying, you actually use a very, very limited vocabulary. And that, you know, I quite agree, is not going to get you through C2 Proficiency particularly happily, is it? Word wall is good. Yeah, we all have to recycle vocabulary ad nauseum, and there are various ways of doing that. Also, Quizlet is quite a fun thing because they can do that as well on their own. Taboo is also, yeah, quite useful, absolutely. Particularly if you include other little rules such as, okay, I'm going to, you know, you have to describe the words, but you have to describe the words using this and this and this phrases, for example. So you're forcing people to connect language. Okay, you might try a snap, you know, the card game snap kind of idea, where you have different piles of cards with different bits and pieces of language, maybe a topic, maybe a cohesive device, maybe some kind of linker that you want them to practice, some kind of specific, more interesting adjectives, and so on and so forth. And they have to pick up the cards and they have to put it all together and create the sentence. All kinds of things to be done with that. Thank you, Maria. I'm very serious about this, and I'm sure the native speakers here in the audience today will probably agree. Your average man out there, your average person out there is not really going to pass proficiency. Even you know, people who've never taught advanced or proficiency level, also not going to get there. Okay, and I do wish that we all had the opportunity to take C2 Proficiency, because I think it would be very, very revealing. Speaking they should. What do you mean by that, Ilya? Speaking they should what? Not true. I'm not sure that I quite agree with you there, Ilya. Yeah. I would agree with David there. The productive skills in general tend to be rather difficult, simply because in regular daily life we don't use this kind of language. We don't have to use it. The point is that C1 and C2 are academic level, and there are those who would say that C2 is not useful if you're not going to pursue a life in academia. But on the other hand, as somebody said a long time ago, it's fun, isn't it? Fun? I think it's fun. Okay, so let me pull everything together, because I do want to stop pontificating. You'll all be relieved to hear. What have we said today? Today we've decided that actually C2 Proficiency, productive skills, the biggest problem, yes, there is to an extent a language issue, but the biggest problem is generating ideas. And we've been using Padlet as a means of trying to increase ideas, or this generation, to make it more automatic. Okay, and that's something that can be ongoing, and we can do day in, day out, forever and ever. If you want people, as we also noticed with the second Padlet, if you want people to practice specific types of language, then you've got to tell them to do so. You have to give an example, and then by and large people will follow that example and will try to experiment and will try to present their ideas in a wider variety of ways. Yeah. Okay. Secret sentences, just an example of things that we can do in the classroom. As I say, the book Speaking Games has more of those ideas, but essentially there are all kinds of things that you can do to do that. Okay, I'm going to, I believe, stop talking right now. Not quite an hour, but there you go. I would remind everybody that if you have specific questions about what I've been saying, then you can use the content questions box at the top of your screen. Otherwise, thank you very much for being with me today and for responding to me largely, actively, and working with me. All right. And I think it's now time to hand you back to Julia. I do hope that you'll enjoy the rest of the Proficiency Wednesday event. I hope to catch some of it myself. Thank you. Julia?
Thank you, Claire. Thanks a lot for the wonderful presentation. Very interactive as always. Really great. See that there are no questions about, well, there is a question about books. We will discuss preparation materials a little bit later. And there is a question about the recording of the webinar. Yes, the recording will be available, and we will share it with you in a couple of days after the event. So now I'd like to welcome the next presenter, David Morris Kirillov. David, please start webcasting.
I think I'm here.
Yes, hello, David. Hi.
Hello. Hello, everybody.
Can you see your slides? Can you see the
I can, absolutely.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Yes, I completely forgot to change the surname there, but I don't think it matters that much.
Okay. So let's start.
Okay, absolutely. So thank Julia for inviting me to be involved in this. certainly going directly after Claire is kind of a tough act to follow. I don't know if I'm going to be as engaging and entertaining as she is, but do my best. So hello, lots of hellos over there, and a hi from Margarita. Yeah, so just a little bit about me in case anyone's interested. Oh, well, thank you. I try. Yeah, so my name is David Morris Kirillov. I've been teaching English as a foreign language for about 15 years or so. I've been teaching here in Moscow in Russia for, thank you, Claire. Good words of confidence there. Yeah, I've been working here in Russia for about 8 years. I've been working specifically with the Cambridge Upper Main Suite mostly for about 10 years or so. B2 first, C1 advanced, and C2 Proficiency. And I think one of the things that gives me the most amount of experience or ability to talk about these things is the degree that I did. Probably like a lot of people who became English teachers, my degree at university was completely useless. I majored in English literature and postmodern philosophy. So good luck getting a job with those kinds of majors. But what it did give me the ability to do is sit and listen to someone droning on and on and on with, you know, talking about really complicated, fancy things without, and taking lots of notes and finding the important things in there. It gave me the ability to read through vast amounts of complex, potentially boring texts and find the really important things and be able to reproduce them. It gave me the ability to create complex, intellectually sounding academic writing in various shades and forms. And it gave me the ability to speak and argue and present an argument while proving that I am understanding the person, my interlocutor, kind of thing. So all of those things have gone into how I prepare students for the Cambridge tests. And instead of spending a lot of time on, we're going to learn this piece of grammar because you should already know it, or we're going to learn all of this vocabulary because you should probably already know these things already, I tend to look at how can we get through the test as effectively as possible and not get stuck on any of the things that Cambridge does that cause difficulties, because a lot of the time Cambridge is trying to trick you. Claire, I think, did a fantastic job with the productive skills, some very good ideas there. Very interesting point as well about at a C2 level, we're expected to be producing very academic, formal sounding constructions. Of course, the speaking test is a bit more casual and stuff like that, but it is supposed to be of a higher level than it is typically expected from native speakers. I've been asked to look at the receptive skills. That is a very, very good question. Yeah, so is the test about demonstrating your skills or impressing the examiners? I would argue that you have to impress the examiner by demonstrating your skills. It's not about producing set phrases and, you know, like using the kind of language that's in the book. It's about using that kind of language to create your own language with a high degree of sophistication. So I'm looking at as I said, the receptive skills. It's mainly reading and listening. This webinar is going to take the form mostly of the reading parts of the reading and use of English. So that's parts 1, 5, 6, and 7. And if we've got time at the end, we can look a little bit at the listening, but unlike various other presenters who are involved in this series, this is the first time that I'm doing a webinar. So I was a little bit unsure of the actual format and what is and is not available and possible. So there were no actual audio segments included as examples or as some sort of practice of the strategies and stuff. So yeah, we'll see how it works. But anyway, if we take a look at the actual, the first part of the reading and use of English, which is part 1, the biggest problem that people tend to have, that candidates have with part 1, is semi-synonyms. And this is not an actual problem at lower level. It's something that, interestingly for me, it becomes more and more of a problem as a student gets better and better with English. They start learning more and more words that have more or less the same meaning, but you know, there's like subtle shades of difference and stuff like that. And just as an example, if anyone thinks that dealing with synonyms is not difficult, here's a list of all the synonyms of the word difficult. So yeah, it can be, let's see, it can be problematic, it can be strenuous, it can be demanding, probably quite bothersome as well, to deal with this particular part of it. And yeah, it's something that interestingly becomes more and more difficult as you go up higher levels, because they're expecting you to have a much wider range of, you know, synonyms of the same words. So just as a test, just to see if we're kind of pitching at the right level here, could I challenge anyone who's paying attention and has access to a keyboard? Can you give me a synonym for one of the best words in the English language, happy? So I'll give you a couple of seconds. A synonym for the word happy. Oh, that's a good one. Elated, I like that. Blissful, very, very cool. Oh, exuberant, that's a great one. Chuffed, nice lower register version there, very, very cool. Over the moon, good expression. Cloud 9. I should be writing all of these down. There are some great words over here. Wow, okay. I'm guessing that that's just going to churn through. Maria, you have made a very, very good point. And that is the important crux of the strategy that I'm going to present for part 1. Context is vital. Not every semi-synonym can be used interchangeably. So just as a first example, we have this sentence. This was taken from a Cambridge publication for preparation for the C2 Proficiency. So it's appropriate. So you can see there, primary education has been underfunded in this area of the country. So then the question becomes, if we need to figure out the word that fits in the gap, how underfunded? What kind of underfunded? So if we look at the language perspective, yeah, we need some sort of a word that collocates. From a purely grammatic perspective, since underfunded is an adjective, we would need some sort of an adverb construction to work as an adverb of degree. By how much is it underfunded, or to what degree is it underfunded? And yeah, those are the kind of things we need to look at. So these are the options. And we've got some great, great examples over here. Anyone want to take a flyer at A, B, C, and D? Oh, we have some very smarty people over here. Absolutely, yes. The answer is A. Unfortunately, from all of the rest of them, they all mean pretty much the same thing: seriously, deeply, highly, remarkably. But seriously is the only one that actually collocates with underfunded. It's one of those, exactly, it is. It's all about the collocations. At this point, I'd like to point out a publication from, if I'm allowed to mention another publisher, Pearson. Pearson released a series of grammar books called My Grammar Lab. There's one released for A12, B12, and then C12. And at the C12 level, there is a fantastic list at the back with some very, very good, solid collocations, and that's a great place to find how a lot of these, how these collocations work and which ones are mostly established and accepted. So what have we got there? Olga, could you explain it? Unfortunately, the main explanation is because English. I know that's probably not the most satisfying answer, but it's simply, it's a collocation. If you want to say that something is underfunded, there are several words that you can use, as we had in the list, but from these 4 options, seriously is the only one that does collocate. Okay, so someone's got the Grammar Labs. They're fantastic books. Again, I'm not too sure if I'm allowed to say this kind of thing, but I actually prefer Grammar Lab to Grammar in Use. I much prefer the presentation that they have of it. It's much more devised by function rather than form as far as the actual grammar constructions are concerned. Another example, going beyond just the basic collocation, we need to look at the overall sentence. And you can see in this example, the menu, blah, 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 of various starters, etc., etc. And a very important thing to keep in mind here is the word that collocates with of. And certainly what we have over here is there is a bunch of possible words that you could use to say that these things are on the menu. Okay, we've already got a couple of answers over here, which is great. Wow. Comprised, full. Well, let's take a look at the options. These are the ones that give you. Absolutely. Okay, we're already getting some answers going on over here. Yeah, unfortunately, what we'd have here is, yeah, consists. Of these different options, the only ones that really can work would be consist and contained, but only consist is the one that collocates with of. You could say the menu contained various starters, but the menu consists of. If we used comprise, as Roman has just mentioned, we would also need a be verb because it's being used as an adjective form of the past participle of the verb. So yeah, the menu is comprised of, so that's why it wouldn't work there, unfortunately. But that is also a very important thing to look at when looking at these sentences, the language around the gap, not just the closest relationship, but the kind of language that is in the rest of the sentence, and how does the different pieces of grammar work, and how is this going to actually fit together? Yeah, so as a basic summary of that, analyze the gap. Think, what kind of word would you put in there? Like, I've actually found when I've done this with groups of students, usually, and we just try and brainstorm, what word would you put in there? At least 60 to 65% of the time, I'd say, we actually generate the correct answer without looking at the options. So if you do have access to the kind of vocabulary that's expected at a C2 level, you should be able to predict what's going on. And then that it really helps. Yeah, so it needs to make sense not only with regards to the word it relates to, but also to the rest of the sentence. Let's see, and we're just going to keep on moving. Part 5, the long multiple choice question. So the big problem with part 5 is Cambridge is trying to trick you. You cannot really get away from that. Cambridge is trying to do terrible things to you and confuse you, and it's what that they are attempting to do. They're really evil. Alexandra, I believe that a copy of the webinar will be available at some point, and everyone who's registered will get an email or a link to download it or something like that. And certainly, Maria, I would agree with you that the challenge is definitely to acquire the vocabulary. And you need access to this language before you can even try to do these kinds of tests. But certainly just knowing masses and masses of words is not enough. We need to know how those words relate to the language around them. And being able to analyze the language really helps you access the vocabulary that you already have. So, on to part 5. Yeah, this is also an example from the from a Cambridge publication, and this was about stand-up comedians. So we have this long, or we have the question, the 4 multiple choices, and then an example of the first paragraph. I've taken the opportunity of looking through this, and you can see part 5, or question 1, they talk about other professions generally have a better image, and they talk about other professions. There's only negative characteristics, and in the passage they talk about negative characteristics. It's harder to generalize about them than other people in other professions. They talk about other professions. Yes, Ekaterina, I agree with you. Part 5 is troublesome. We'll go with that. Try and think of another synonym for the word difficult. And people make negative judgments of them, and they also mention superficial stories in the tabloids. So all of these things are in here. All 4 of the options you can pretty much guarantee will be somewhere in there. It's really annoying sometimes, because if you just read the question, read the options, and then go and look for which option you have in the text, you'll find all 4. So I would recommend we avoid that. Instead, what we should be doing is ignore the options. This is the part that confuses people. It's the part that causes so much difficulty and confusion, because you read the options and then you look at the text and all 4 options are there. It's just really confusing. So my recommendation would be ignore the options. Don't look at them until you have your answer. So we have, for example, the next question from the same text. What does the writer say about people who wear uniform? Now, I understand it's kind of a long passage over there, and I hope everyone can see it okay on whatever devices you're using. But let me give you a few moments to read through this and see if you can find basically where they talk about, or even provide a summary of what the writer says about people who wear uniforms. I'm going to enjoy some coffee, if that's okay with everyone. Okay, there's a good one. Yeah, we're homing in on the anonymity part. Definitely. Okay, avoiding decisions, resign their individuality. Cool. Okay, so I think we've got some really, really good ideas over here. We're zooming in on the important points and trying to get beyond all of the potential distractions. So what I'm going to do now is move away from the text. So we have a good idea what our answer is. So if we go to the actual questions, and we can see these are the different answers. And probably if you read through the entire text, you would have found reference to each of these things. But I would like to, I'll give you a moment or two more to read through those. We have some contentious ideas in the chat. Okay, but I'm seeing a bit of a trend, so that's cool. If we return to the text, I would argue that the answer is in this part. The emotional intellectual course taken to those who are drawn to anonymity are easily observed but not easily deflected. And when they have work, they do it over and over again in the safety of a routine. So if we look at back to the answers again, it cannot be A, because they don't actually criticize performers, even if they are critical. B, it says in the text, they want to do what they do again and again and again. Yeah, it doesn't really say what they think about other people, although it does mention inadequacy. And D, talking about then the desires are never met when they're at work, but it does say that when they are at work, they want to do these things. So I would say that their desires could be met. So for a bunch of you, I'd say at least 50% of you, we can all agree the answer was B. So yay, well done. Give yourselves a round of applause and pat yourselves on the back if you got B. So this would be my approach. Read the question, find your answer. In theory, you should have access to the grammatical and lexical resources that are necessary for the kinds of text presented at C2 level. And it's mainly the multiple choices that can cause the confusion. So avoid them, remove them as much as possible. Just read the question, find your answer in the text. And then once you know you have the answer, come back and find the multiple choice option that agrees with you. Don't try to find an answer for each of the multiple choices. Find the multiple choice answer that agrees with your understanding. So, Elena, you are absolutely welcome. I hope that this kind of thing is useful. So that is essentially part 5. They all pretty much work the same way. It's all multiple choice. So just remove the multiple choices. It really helps. Made my day. Okay. I think it helps. Sometimes, depending on the kind of question, keeping the multiple choices in mind is useful. Absolutely. But sometimes it just gets in the way. It absolutely does. So, reading and use of English, part 6. If you guys remember the long text with every second paragraph removed, and then all of the paragraphs are all mixed up and that kind of thing. Before we move on to my assessment of the problem with part 6, what do you guys think? Olga, you are welcome. Oh, both Olgas. Okay. Igor thinks it's a nightmare. Paragraphs are too long, it's frustrating, it's tricky. Troublesome. Okay, we've got some more synonyms for difficult. Okay, toughest, certainly as far as the reading is concerned, I think you could probably demonstrate, if you looked at statistics, you could probably find people tend to lose marks with part 6 more than any other part, either part 5 or part 6. But I think you probably find that the marks lost kind of go more into part 6 rather than anything else. Okay, well, from my assessment of reading and use of English part 6 is it's absolutely awful. The very first time I'm going to share a brief anecdote. The first time I encountered this part of the test was actually in the previous format at CAE level, back when it was still called CAE. And if you remember, if any of you guys have been around that long, the old past examination books were orange. And I had one of those and I opened it up for the first time, not even entirely sure what the Cambridge exams were. And I found this text about Swiss chocolate cake, the Sasha Tort. And it's this long explanation of the history of this Swiss chocolate cake. And I saw the gapped text and all of the paragraphs. Oh, Katerina, you've seen it. It was a nightmare. I just looked at this for a couple of seconds and just thought, how is this possible? It's how is anyone expected to do this? But fortunately, over the years, I've managed to calm down a little bit. But it's still difficult. I mean, it's a long text about an esoteric subject, using complex language, and yeah. I've seen a couple of people talking about, using reference and cohesive language. And that's great. That's absolutely fantastic for the lower level. Certainly at FCE or the B2 first, that's exactly what they're testing. At C1 advanced, they're looking at these things, reference, the use of pronouns and determiners and things like that, which is really, really interesting stuff. I think one of the best I saw was in a course book, and one of the gaps, or one of the paragraphs you need to place, started with the sentence, and that's what he did. And my initial thought was, well, they've just given us that point. That should be so interesting and so easy. We just find a paragraph that tells you what some man wanted to do. And it's clearly right there. But at C2 level, it gets a little bit more complex than that. If we can use pronouns, if we can use cohesive devices, if we can use these reference, that's fantastic. That's absolutely great. But it does get a little bit trickier at C2. They purposefully make it more difficult. So this is my reaction. This is my strategy, summed up in 2 wonderful, wonderful words in Russian. Basically, it's all about, and what? But of course, it doesn't stop there. This is how I would recommend everyone approach the gaps. Read the paragraph before and ask yourself this question, and then answer it. Answer that question to the best of your ability, and try and work on what I would call narrative conventions. So these are the kind of things that we use whenever we're telling a story. It's the kind of things that we use when we talk about point A and then move on to point B and then move on to point C. And it's how a story progresses. This is the kind of thing that they're looking for part 6. And this is the key to understanding it. If we can predict what the next logical step in the narrative will be, it becomes so much easier to find which paragraph fits into that gap. So this should be an example. This is also taken from a Cambridge exam prep publication. I'll give you a moment to read about Detective Inspector Luke Thanet. So, of course, just to remind you, exactly, Yulia? And what? So, here is my prediction. In this paragraph, we learn that he is happy. And he has everything he could want. Everything is absolutely wonderful. And what? So, I would argue that according to narrative conventions, either we're going to get more details about his happy life and, you know, figuring out how he met his wife, more details about his children or something like that, or more likely, this is going to change. We cannot let Inspector Thanet remain happy. It just cannot be accepted. Yes, Galina, there should be a however moment. We've set up the moment and now we need to introduce the conflict. So, and please understand, this will be a little bit easier than the actual test because I don't have enough space. Okay. Yeah, this is a little bit easier, I'll imagine. I agree with you. And certainly, it has to be F. We can even see, oh, I remember I have a pointed click over here. So, blissfully unaware. So, here in the beginning, he's happy. And now we talk about him being blissful. And everything is wonderful. And if you imagine the image, the quintessential image, Olga, I agree with you. This one is very, very obvious. Yeah, I'm hoping that was a joke, but anyway. Yeah, this one was pretty obvious. It was just like an example. We have the setup at the beginning. Everything's great. Everything's fantastic. And then we introduce change. So, and that's a very, very classic narrative convention. Let's have a look at another one. This is the next two paragraphs. Katerina, that is a valid point, but I would argue that in most situations, the standard narrative conventions typically still get followed. People are already guessing. These are, if you imagine the original text, the very first paragraph was introducing him, then we have the gap about something happening, and then these are the second and third paragraph. We haven't looked at the gaps yet. So hopefully we have some ideas about these two gaps. What would happen between these two? That is my question. What would happen between these two paragraphs? Okay. Well, certainly the wife is introduced in this paragraph. Okay, we've got a good idea. There's a book, there's a newspaper, those kind of things. Okay, let's take a look. 2 more gaps. Which of these COA would you put between these 2 paragraphs? I think we have, this is pretty much unanimous. Very, very cool. Yes, so absolutely. And that's what this is all about. It's the narrative conventions, how a story is told. And certainly while the actual pieces of language can be pretty complicated, I read one not too long back about, what is it called? I know it used to be called Ayers Rock, that huge red mountain in Australia, but now it's called Uluru or something. I can't remember exactly. But that is one of the more complicated ones that I've encountered because it is pretty, Uluru, thank you. Yeah, it's very artistic and abstract and kind of goes backwards and forwards between what they're experiencing and what the person's thinking about and things that they learned in the past. And that one is quite tricky. But a lot of the time, part 6 can be approached with this type of idea. The narrative conventions. Nikita, you've read it. It is quite tricky. Oh, that's a very interesting question, Irina. Yes, it absolutely would. Narrative conventions work in nonfiction as well. As long as the story has been written intelligently, if I can use it that way. And certainly Marguerite is asking like a very similar question, like scientific articles, factual things, nonfiction. It can be a little bit more complicated, but they are also building up a narrative. They're trying to present a point, they're trying to present a certain position or a stance and have you agree with them at the end of it. And this always happens, and you'll find with most scientific articles or most works of nonfiction, there will be a historical element, there will be some sort of a narrative element about the life and times of the person who is involved in the story and what they did and then what they had done beforehand and all those kinds of things. It does come into it, and these narrative conventions really, really help. As a bonus, the kinds of things that I'm talking about here, or that we're talking about here, with reading and use of English part 6, are also very, very useful when it comes to writing. To a degree speaking as well, and here I realize I'm treading a little bit on Claire's territory, talking about the productive skills, but this is just like a pro tip kind of thing. Yeah, being able to understand how narrative conventions work to construct a greater narrative is very, very useful for your own kinds of writing as well. Whether it's the part 1 essay or part 2, it's probably easier to implement in things like articles and reviews, but for any kind of writing, when you have this organizational structure, point A, point B, point C, the narrative conventions really does make it a lot more cohesive and coherent, and really push those organization scores up through the roof. Irina, that's a very useful question. And yes, absolutely. The more you're reading, Cambridge have even told us where these texts come from. And that various scientific journals, higher register intellectual kind of journals and those kinds of things. And we can reference those types of publications and just read through these. Certainly, I would not recommend just reading like, interesting. It needs to involve active reading. You know, reading an article with some paper, like writing down vocabulary, making points, you know, like analyzing the language instead of just reading and understanding. Reading and understanding isn't enough. We need to read and analyze and pull it to pieces, almost like a deconstructive method. Olga, yes, it does. Obviously not with the scientific developments and the scientific results. You could only predict those things if you're a scientist in the same field. But the narrative conventions work as far as any kind of text is concerned. Anything greater than one paragraph. If you have two paragraphs, those two paragraphs connect to each other. They need to flow from one to another. And if you have three, the flow runs all the way through. So it works with pretty much any kind of text that has followed the typical narrative conventions of English. So let me just check. Let's move on to part 7. This one, I find it's a bit hit and miss. A lot of people have very few problems with it. Other people, they just completely fall apart. And, you know, it's like, I have no idea how to deal with this. There's just so many questions. This is the problem with part 7. There's a lot of information. Margarita, I love your optimism, definitely. Like, definitely, that's very, very cool. And yeah, as far as the reading is concerned, by and large, this is probably the part that causes the least difficulty. But we've got some slides to go through. Yeah, for the people who do have problems, lots of information to keep in mind, keeping in mind at the same time 10 different questions. And it can be quite tricky. Fortunately or otherwise, in various Cambridge resources, they give us a solution. So this is the, I don't want to say official, but this is the recommended strategy that's released in certain Cambridge publications. So I'm just calling it the Cambridge method. Read and remember all 10 questions. Slowly and carefully read through the different passages, and every time you find something that reminds you of one of the questions, go back, find which question it reminded you of, and make a mark. Me personally, I'm not a big fan, because you're reading all 10 of these questions, and they're not actually questions, they're just statements out of context. Like, they don't actually mean anything. And to make it difficult, they make it intentionally vague. Katerina, I support you. My strategy, ignore the questions for now. Don't look at that first page. Absolutely. Go through the first text. There's 4, maybe 5 texts usually. Yeah, so read through the first text, underline anything that might be important. Probably you'll get more things than you need, but that's fine. Yeah, the more you do it, the easier it gets. And then go back to the questions and find the ones that you want. If you need to change answers as you get to a new text, that's fine. It's absolutely okay. So, as an example, this is the first text from a part 7 question. So I'll give you a moment or two, read through it, and just think, what kinds of things would you consider worth underlining or marking? Katerina, that could be, oh, yeah, Katerina, sorry. That could be interesting. That sounds like a lot of information to keep in your head, though. If you can, then that's absolutely fantastic. I would argue that there might be a little bit of cross-chatter there. Certainly, names and dates. I'm not too sure about the names and dates thing, because I don't think they're going to ask you in which passage do they mention Father John McHenry. That sounds too easy. I've made a couple of suggestions. So, for example, from this particular passage, I would recommend the fact that only one person could enter at a time. And then a couple of these others, it's different specifics. So there was a Coast Guard, someone trying to find an ancient Roman temple, a young Roman Catholic priest with an interest in fossils. So they could ask us in which passage do they discuss the different people in this group. The fact that the priest was new to town, maybe, or was working in a private capacity or something like that. And the fact that it's a strange world of darkness, narrow fissures and magical stalactites that form crystalline chandeliers and pillars. Yeah, just like a description. So all of these things could be relevant. Keep in mind, could be. They might be useful. And could we agree with these? Let me just check that I haven't left anything out. Okay, so we have one person at a time could enter. There was a Coast Guard, you know, maybe like talking about someone's job, certainly an interest in fossils, someone trying to discover ancient ruins, someone worked as, maybe he arrived recently, he was a newcomer, he worked in a private capacity, or maybe just a description. And here are the 10 questions. So, which of these questions would be answered by text A? Ludmila, that's a very, very good point. I agree with you. "49, a revised assessment of something found in the cave." Okay, we've got 50, 53 different aims of people. Sounds about right. Physical appearance of the cave. Okay. 47, subject that people previously had no information on. Not too sure. But certainly, since this is only the very first part of the text, if we write A for half of them, that's not a problem. We can revise it later. If you like the official answers, it was number 50 and 53. So anyone who typed in 50 or 53, give yourself a round of applause. Pat on the back or something like that. The second part, and don't worry, we're not going to go through the whole text. This is the last piece that we're looking at. So, the question then is, again, what would you consider important and relevant for passage B? Okay, Olga, that's a very good point there. Okay, let me just add that one in. So yeah, the fact that someone left the rest of the group, someone went on their own. There was already a comment about the ground had already been disturbed. Yeah, let's see what else was relevant. Maybe felt more awe than joy, like mixed feelings or an unusual feelings. The fact that he wrote later could be important. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, yeah, keeping a secret, that could also work. And so fearing that my discoveries would be damaged. Someone mentioned that a while back already. Yeah, the unusual feeling. Cool. And certainly these are the ones that I just did. If you want more in there, there is nothing wrong with that. A couple of times I've gone through these and I've highlighted more than half of the text. And it's fine. There is a body of evidence that suggests that reading through something and then underlining even large parts of it helps you remember these certain things. So these will be all the points that I would recommend are relevant, pertinent, if I can use that word. And then back to the questions. Okay, we've got a 46. That's danger of drawing attention to. Yeah, absolutely. He didn't want his things to get damaged. 48, reaction to the presence of something in a thought. Okay. 52, sign of previous activity, the fact that it was disturbed. Irina, I believe after I'm done in about 10 minutes, there's at least another 30 minutes of new materials. Like, to be honest, I really want to see that. That's going to be like the really good stuff, because as far as all of the teachers and this are concerned, I know we all like shiny new books to read through and like, oh, here's some good material. I'm looking forward to that part, but that's not me. Okay, we've got some fantastic answers over here, and the official answers are 46 and 52. Cool. Danger of drawing attention to a certain contents of the cave. I was afraid that it might be broken. And sign of previous activity in the cave. He moved to the disturbed area. Okay, so we are getting a little bit towards the end, and like I said at the beginning, I mainly wanted to focus on the reading part of the reading and use of English, but we do still have some time. As one final pro tip for specifically part 7 before we move away from paper 1, if you think that it's doable with these different, the texts, 4 texts, sometimes 5. I'm not too sure if I've ever seen 6. If anyone has seen 6 texts in the part 7, please let me know. I off the top of my head, I don't remember. But if you are running out of time, and if you find this to be quite easy, as a pro tip, instead of reading a text and then going back, reading the next text, answering, reading the next text, read everything. Go through everything and underline absolutely everything, and then answer all of the questions at once. Once you've had enough practice, you can answer question 44, D, question 45, B, 46, B, 47, C, and you just plug in all of the answers and it goes so quickly. Maria, another good question. Are there 2 questions? It can vary wildly. There will be minimum 1 answer for each text. I don't remember off the top of my head ever seeing one where at least one text had no answers. So I would say that there will be at least 1 answer per each text, but it can vary wildly. You can have one answer for text A and then 4 answers for text C, for example. Yeah. So, I mean, it can be tricky. Certainly one thing that I found that I find even more difficult, if you guys have encountered this, usually it's these 4 different texts, but occasionally when it's a story and it's 4 or 5 paragraphs of exactly the same story, the same writer, same style, I find that harder to differentiate. If it's, say, 4 or 5 passages of an art critic talking about a work of art, for example, or something like that, I find that easier. But when it's 4 or 5 passages that are all part of one longer story, for me, that's more difficult for some reason. Okay, so on to the last. There's a couple more slides, just we can run through some of them pretty quickly. Listening, the ideas for this, it applies. I just want to talk a little bit about part 2 and part 4. The idea of anticipation and prediction. These are the vital skills needed for these 2 parts of the listening. And certainly, Margarita, we will be looking a little bit at part 4. Everyone hates part 4. So if we have this is from an extract where this woman, Karen, is talking about her work experience. The first question, Karen spent 2 days gap and checking rooms. So I think I would argue that the gap is going to be some sort of an activity that you can be done in a hotel, cleaning, making beds, or some other ing activity. Okay. However, the important thing, yes, Yelena, you're absolutely right. It's almost definitely going to be an ing, like doing something. Definitely. We've got a couple of great ideas over here. An important point, though, in the sentence, at the end of her first work experience, that is very important, because it could be that during the whole process of her work experience, she was doing this, doing that, doing that, doing that, and then at the end, I was doing this. So let's take a look at the actual, this is the extract from the tape script where the answer is. Looks like we're getting some good answers already. Yeah, absolutely. So, for the last 2 days, I worked with the floor housekeeper planning rotas and checking brooms. And you can see I've marked in red, cleaning rooms, changing beds, more gerund answers. And those are traps. They are trying to trick you. Yeah, so if we're listening for, oh, they're going to say ing things. If you're not careful, as soon as she says, I learned all about cleaning rooms, you're going to write cleaning rooms. So be very, very careful for that. It's a trap. We need to look out for the last 2 days. So we need to make those connections as well. Just hearing the appropriate word is not enough. So that would be the official answer, planning rotas. And very briefly, since people were asking for it, part 4, pretty much the same kind of strategy, anticipation and prediction. We need to look at these things. We're only going to look briefly at part 1, at task 1. People talking about a city they have visited and then why they visited the city. So the question becomes, what kind of language might they use to suggest why they visited the city? You know, as part of a holiday, someone could say, for example, I just needed to get away from it all and take a break for a couple of days or something like that. To see friends, I needed to catch up with some old, you know, buddies from high school that I hadn't seen in a long time. Pro tip, if one of the extracts says, for an example, for for an interview. Katerina, yes, on the answer sheet. Capital letters in pencil, gaps where there are gaps between words and that kind of thing, yes. It says specifically on the answer sheet, write in block capital letters, yes. You absolutely should do that. Even for reading and use of English part 4, where they just give you a blank space, and I mean, part 2 and 3, they give you blocks, so, but part 4, they just give you a long blank. I would recommend printing block capital letters, and yes, spaces between words, just to make sure they know that you have written it correctly. Yeah, like don't give them any opportunity for them to say, well, you got the answer right, but there's no space, so wrong. Leave gaps where you should. If there's an apostrophe or something, put that in an extra gap. You've got enough space, so do it. So anyway, if, for example, in this case, if someone says the word for an interview, there is a 99.999% chance that the answer will not be for an interview. They're not going to make it so easy for you. Anyway, here is speaker 1. So you tell me, which reason did they go to the city? Okay, we have a vote for F and another one. Okay, and all of the Fs are rolling in. I think it's unanimous. It's a little bit easier if when we're reading the tape script instead of listening to it. But yes, absolutely. I wanted to see if it had seemed any different after all these years and talking about a feeling of nostalgia. This part about the cathedral might trip some people up and they think to see a particular building, but it's a trap. It's absolutely a trap. Be very, very careful of that kind of thing. The cathedral is a massive, magnificent building is just an example. And I think we are pretty much out of time. I just had one more speaker to go through there, but certainly it was just another, like this, the second speaker, and the answer was D. But anyway, yeah, thank you guys so much for paying attention. I don't know if there are any questions in the question folder. Nothing really. I don't think so. Open resources to practice listening tasks. There are multitudes of useful things to find all over the internet. The one place that I would almost recommend, but I'm not too sure if I'm allowed to, is a certain Russia-based social media platform that does not care too much about copyrights. But I did not recommend that you do that. Please understand, I am not recommending you commit illegal things. So don't do that, but just be aware that it's a possibility. As far as listening is concerned, just listening to things generally, things like TED Talks are great. Let me see if I can put, okay, looks like I can, there, I've just added into the chat channel. This is one of my recommendations. Look for that on YouTube. Go to YouTube and just type in David Mitchell Soapbox. It's a great way to, you know, like just, it's a great thing to listen to. It's basically this very, very English person. He is a peer of people like Stephen Fry and Hugh Laurie, and he is of that ilk. And each one of these episodes on YouTube, the Soapbox, is pretty much him speaking for about 3 to 5 minutes about something he is not happy about. And he is complaining about something in a very middle-class English way. I see there's a whole bunch of great examples over here. hidden brain, Lindy beige. There's all these things I've never even heard of. There is a very interesting question here. What is the general statistics on passing of CPE in, I'm assuming, Russian Federation? That is something I know absolutely nothing about. I just work here, man. I do not have access to those kinds of statistics. You'd need to speak directly to Cambridge, and I don't know if they like share that information. I do not know. Okay, so Katerina seems to think that they're very high. Most of my experience with students in the Russian Federation has been very, very good. And yeah, so we are pretty much wrapped up here. I don't know, is Yulia around if she wants to jump back in? And yes, Katerina, I agree with you. David Mitchell is one of my favorites. I really just love it. He gets very, his intellectually angry ranting is like fantastic. And
thank you, David. Great presentation, and I see wonderful feedback in the chat. So really useful recommendations, strategies, and of course resources. There was a question about general statistics on passing of CPE in Russian Federation. So I'm putting a link in the chat box. We have some great statistics available on our website. This statistics is for the year 2004 and 2018. But I'm sure that well, the results haven't changed a lot since 2018, so you can have a look and just get some understanding. This great statistics is available for most of our exams, and yes, that's really useful for teachers and for students to understand the average situation in the country.
If I may, I heard 2-3 years ago, seemingly people were noticing a dip in FCE for schools writing. That was in conjunction with the introduction of the new format with the Part 1 essay. And it seems a lot of the teachers were still teaching the previous concepts, the style and the presentation and stuff. And they had problems with adapting to the new thing. But I believe that they've overcome that and they know what they're doing now.
Yes, it always happens. So when we are changing the format, we are trying to do lots of events, teacher training sessions, webinars, seminars to inform teachers about these changes. Because usually when we change the format, we see some problems well, that students face at the exam day, and the results are slightly different. But, well, actually, that's okay. We're used to it. And, of course, we just need some time for people to get used to the new format of the exam. Yes.
Change is always painful.
Yes. Thanks a lot for your presentation.
Okay. It was really, thank you for having me. I hope it was useful and interesting to everyone. I'm going to click the stop webcasting button now, right?
Yes, right. And now we have another session, official exam partners, Cambridge University Press. Ludmila Alexandrovna Gorodetskaya, Cambridge University Press Senior ELT Consultant. Ludmila Alexandrovna, please join us. Go on air.
Do you hear me well?
We can hear you.
Because sometimes I have to adjust my mic. Do I need to adjust my mic, or do you hear me well?
I can hear you well. Dear, please put a reaction in the chat box. Can you hear well?
Just put a plus. Just put a plus if you hear me well, so I don't need to adjust my microphone. And I need my presentation, which Yulia will install. Thank you very much. My dear friends, I hope to take less than an hour, because I know that you are tired and you deserve. However, my task is much easier because I'm not going to discuss any particular tasks with you. My task is to familiarize you with Cambridge materials for developing receptive and productive skills at high levels of proficiency. Even more so that I've seen some of the questions about the materials in the chat box when I was listening to Claire and David. My name is Ludmila Gorodetskaya and I teach at Moscow State University. Actually, I am full-time professor there. And I also work for Cambridge University Press Office in Moscow. I've been working with Cambridge for more than 20 years now. Since the office in Moscow was open in 1997. So you can imagine how long is the history of Cambridge University Press and Cambridge Assessment working together. Now, I will show you that the materials are available, and they are. Yeah, I have lost one error, which leaves me to the next slide. Where is it? Just a moment. Yeah. I will show you some of the materials that are quite available, not only in Moscow and St. Petersburg and bigger cities, but also all over the regions through your book distribution companies that are mainly affiliates of Britannia Book Company, who has a BookBridge specialized bookshop. However, there are some bigger bookshops which also sell Cambridge materials with pleasure, because the statistics for Cambridge preparation allows us to conclude that this is one of the most popular directions in language teaching in Russia. So the course that you see on the screen is called Objective Proficiency Second Edition, and it provides preparation for Cambridge English Proficiency exam, as we used to know it. Even earlier called Certificate of Proficiency in English, CPE, and today referred to as C2 Proficiency, one of Cambridge English qualifications. But I hear all these names used interchangeably by our colleagues and students. I know from your chat box that some of you are preparing students for C2 Proficiency. Some of you are preparing yourselves. My congratulations, particularly if you have already passed C1 Advanced. Now, what I'm drawing your attention to in this particular slide is the stamp on the cover. You may not necessarily see it properly. It says Official Cambridge Exam Preparation Course. So this stamp is not just, a trick to draw the customer's attention. No, it is really a very serious sign of alignment of cooperation between the two Cambridge parts, which we, Yulia and her colleagues, and me and my colleagues belong to. What you also see is this error which says software. This course has some software. It also says here below C2 language profile. Language profile is a research database which allows Cambridge University Press to select most appropriate vocabulary, which causes difficulties, errors, and just problem areas, particularly with collocations, as we heard in today's presentations. Phrases and collocations are probably things that have to be learned properly, but first of all provided by the publishers properly. And also what you may see here on the cover says, for revised exam from March 2013. And the date, 2013, is in fact a celebration date. And you may know that Cambridge Proficiency was introduced as an exam in English as a foreign language earlier than any other exams. It was introduced a century before. It was 1913 before the First World War. And it is the earliest Cambridge exam in English as a foreign language. So, you know, it was celebrated, the centenary, 100th years celebration was in 2013. And before that, the format of the exam was reconsidered slightly. I cannot say it changed drastically, revolutionary, but those who were teaching earlier than that may know about the differences. I'm not going to dwell upon it now. Of course, it is important to use up-to-date materials, the materials that the publisher, Cambridge University Press, immediately issues when our partner, Cambridge Assessment, has changed this or another exam. Now, next point, next slide, sorry about that, is the objective proficiency components, the components of the course you've seen on the screen. These are student books with or without answers, teacher's book, class audio CDs, workbook with or without answers, student book pack for self-study, free downloadable software which can be used and probably should be used today instead of CD-ROM, and free downloadable audio materials which again should be used or can be used instead of audio CDs. In many countries, audio CDs are not applicable. In some departments of our universities in Russia, audio players are still used, so you can choose between the two. And Presentation Plus Code, which is a fantastic software, a separate material which comprises student book, workbook, teacher's book, audio materials, everything which a whole bunch of published paper book materials can comprise. Now, key features. What are the key features of this course? As I've said, it is updated to the latest version of the exam, launched in 2013. It contains 20 units, each consisting of 3 double-page lessons. It is full of interesting and motivating material for career and general purposes, suitable for both students preparing for proficiency exam and for those who need C2 general English study material. It covers all parts of the proficiency exam in detail. It includes regular exam folders that provide systematic practice and advice for each part of the exam. It has 10 writing folders that give extensive support for writing paper tasks. And it also includes a grammar folder at the end, which contains deductive explanations and examples complementing the inductive approach used in the lessons. Please take notice of these two approaches. Deductive, which is presentation, practice, production, explanation, the approach that has been used in Russia for decades and is still very popular with our teachers, and inductive approach, which is used in the lessons. These outbalance each other and make a very good mixture, a very good combination of approaching to grammar. Why is objective proficiency unique and most authoritative? Well, you may realize that the stamp I was pointing at with my pointer means that it is somehow connected with the assessment, with another organization running this workshop today. It is endorsed by Cambridge English Language Assessment as one of official preparation materials. It is informed by Cambridge Learner Corpus based on previous exam papers. Here, I have to make a short comment. If you are not familiar with the idea of language corpora, then Language Learner Corpus is about or over than 20 billion entries database, which is comprised of everything which was produced by candidates at previous exams. Writing papers, listening, reading and speaking, recorded, everything goes into the learner corpus, processed, not just, you know, a mass of the data indiscriminately provided by the assessment. No, it is very thoroughly analyzed, and the most frequent problem areas are taken out, borrowed from the corpus. Then it shows typical mistakes made by candidates in the exam, naturally, not just the mistakes that teachers hear now and then, but the mistakes objectively shown by the corpus. And then it tackles typical proficiency problem areas. Problem areas are broader than just mistakes. You know, it may concern strategies of tackling this or another examination task. Something similar to what you heard from David, but given in the so-called boxes, which I will tell you more about in a few slides. I'm showing you the lines I'm reading. Why? Because I know that some of you are tired, as I've said. Some of you may have problems with the sound of your computers, of your internet connection. That is why I prefer to end up today's conference with being a little bit more pedantical about what I'm saying and what I'm showing. The course Objective Proficiency contains authentic language examples from another corpus, multi-billion Cambridge International Corpus of English. It is one of the largest corpora in the world, the corpus of the English language, containing several sub-corpora: American English, British English, General English, Business English, Academic English, Spoken English, Written English, and it can be further subdivided as 20 or more than 20 billion entries, analyzed again through very sophisticated computer programs. It is further subdivided into whatever the person who is writing a course material, who is writing serious scientific material on testing and assessment can use. For example, they are interested in gender differences or in age differences of the speakers of English, as demonstrated in their everyday oral communication, spoken communication, or in their professional communication, in the writing, in the speaking. So spoken corpus is a huge and absolutely revolutionary database, which is also included. So the language examples are not out of date. They are very up to date, but yes, they are not as frequently used in the everyday communication, even of educated speakers of English, native speakers of English. That's why you heard from Claire and from David that even for them, some tasks in Cambridge Proficiency may seem a little bit difficult. But yes, indeed, they are based on verified examples from multi-billion Cambridge International Corpus of English, and of course only native speakers examples and only educated adult speakers examples are borrowed for constructing activities and exercises in the course book. Then it has comparatively short units that allow to maintain students' interest, smooth pacing through the tasks, and gives students a sense of progress. Then it has a self-study edition which provides answers to all the exercises, detailed explanations, highlighted tape scripts, and useful cultural background information. I want to draw your attention to the last 2 points. Highlighted tape scripts are very useful because they underline the sentences or parts of the sentences which contained the hidden answer. It is absolutely paraphrased from the task, but students, if they don't recognize them when they just listen to the audio materials, can have a look at highlighted tape scripts and find what they missed, what was important to hear. And useful cultural background information. Of course, there's no part in Cambridge 2 Proficiency which assesses or evaluates cultural awareness of candidates, but it is everywhere. You know, it is scattered everywhere because the level of proficiency is is called an expert level, near native level of English. So inevitably, there's lots of cultural information on the pages of this book. Then, what else do we can we look at? This is a quote from J.D. Brown, as you see at the end, James Dean Brown, who is one of the world's best-known experts in language testing and assessment. He doesn't belong to Cambridge. He's an American professor working full-time in one of American universities, who published lots of books on the principles and theory of language testing and assessment. This is a quotation from him, which I cannot help reading because it contains the analysis and interpretation of the term proficiency. However, it also makes a task, a very common task, where connectives or linking devices, linking words have to be fit in the gaps. The task may seem a little bit easier. I mean, the devices themselves are common. Nobody has invented any exotic connectives. However, this task may come across and has come across, I have come across it in one of proficiency preparation materials, but it had a form of an exercise. It was not an authentic task from the exam. I will show you the next page where all these words have already been inserted in the gaps and colored red, and I will be reading the passage while you will be looking for only one answer which is wrong. You have to find one answer which is wrong. Since the word proficiency holds such a prominent place in ELP, English Language Proficiency, I want to be especially clear about what it means. First, humans can be proficient in many things: art, brushwork, golf, Monopoly, music, sailing, small arms, Chinese, English, and many other things. Second, synonyms for proficiency include ability, accomplishment, adeptness, aptitude, command, competence, expertise, facility, knack, know-how, mastery, performance, skillfulness, and talent. A majority of those words imply that proficiency includes knowledge and skill, and the ability to combine the two. However, a person who has knowledge about sailing is not necessarily proficient at sailing. A person who has knowledge but is also skillful at sailing is more likely to be proficient at sailing. Accordingly, the demonstrated ability to combine the knowledge and skills when actually on the water seems key to knowing if a person has sailing proficiency. Okay, so if you just write in the chat box which answer is wrong, I will know that you're still there, that you have not run away to have some tea or dinner or look after your children. Can you use the chat box, please? I will be very happy if you can. So, however, yes, Margarita was the first to find the wrong answer, which just sometimes it cannot be used in the exam, of course, but you doing the activities may sometimes use this trick to keep your students alert. Okay, but what I like here is the sense of humor which J.D. Brown is known for. He's a visitor to many countries, including Russia, and has a lot of international projects he's involved in. And also the depth of understanding of the term proficiency he reveals in this short paragraph. Then we will look at the next slide, and we will see the variety of topics in the course book. You see only 10 bulleted points, while, as I said earlier, there are 20 units in the course book. So I squeezed only half of the units with their topics into this slide, but I've slightly changed the topics because, you know, the topics as revealed in the name of the unit are not necessarily as complete as all the aspects of the topic presented in teaching materials of the unit, such as listening, texts for reading, and even activities which previously were use of English, today included in reading. Even those grammar vocabulary activities, they still contain the topics which may be quite interesting and developing human cognitive skills. I will explain why. Key changes in people's personal and public lives, Unit 1. Aspects of the future, forecasts, likelihood of events. It's a descriptive line presenting different parts of the unit. Strange behavior of animals, animals as predictors. Predictors of what? Predictors of catastrophes and natural disasters, and predictors of weather changes. Rituals and ceremonies in different cultures. Very interesting and very timely. Advertising, not only advertising as it is usually presented in many course books, but it is about exploiting the vulnerable. So there's a lot of psychology in every of these topics. The enduring myth of music and mathematics, or music versus mathematics. The role of eyes in biology as a human or animal organ, and in perception of visual arts. Again, combining uncombinable. Urban development, lifestyles and fashion, wishes and preferences, love and friendship on the internet, and 10 more which are not on this slide. So why I think that these topics are not only linguistically important because they provide the language which students have to perceive, properly understand and interpret, and also the language they are supposed to use in the exam. Though these are not lists of words to learn by heart and then, as Claire said, tick in your mind when you've used one of them. It is a wrong approach. What is right is to present their natural, authentic use in different contexts so that they become a part and parcel of the command of the language that the students develop at this level. Now, tasks both challenging and enjoyable. Another feature of the course, that challenge should not be boring. It should be enjoyable. I've borrowed only one example of one task from Unit 1. Unit 1 is usually easier than the rest of the units in the same course of the same level, particularly closer to the end of this course. Why? Because it is a bridge between the previous level, in our case C1, and the level students are only starting to master with the course Objective Proficiency. They've read the text, and the question is, which of these do's and don'ts are mentioned in the article? Tick the boxes which apply and circle the sentences or phrases in the text that justify your answer. So it is not an exam task, it is an exercise. But look at the recommendations. Do not overdo jewelry. Do not break into business discussions. Attend lots of events. Do not refer to your spouse's business expertise. Do not overindulge in food and drink. Exercise control when it comes to dancing. Find out something about the host before the event. Dress comfortably for all occasions. Do not discuss topics of a religious nature. So that you can guess that the text is about communicating at a public event, be it a corporate party, be it a garden party you've been invited to in an English-speaking country where people of different cultures and religions may get together. So in fact, if I had a webinar on intercultural communication, I would tell you a couple of stories about each of the mistakes that can be formed, can be made and were actually made by my friends and colleagues or by myself when dealing with, say, Cambridge University Press people at various international conferences, or people from other nationalities, when we, particularly earlier in the 90s or early 2000s or 2000s, didn't know much about how professional people behave and what they actually keep under control. I've seen some friends of mine who got a couple of alcohol and then thought, why not behaving naturally? And naturally sometimes means vulgar. Okay, then correcting common mistakes at spot boxes in every unit. I mentioned at the beginning that I will show you some spot boxes. They are actually little frames, sometimes taking half a page, sometimes taking 1/10 of a page, very small indeed, which contain some information very useful for this exam. Like, for example, phrase spot. There are a lot of phrase spots or collocation spots. One of the tasks is reshuffle words to make common phrases and then fit them into the gaps in sentences. The sentences are below. In the real tasks, some of these collocations are given in their correct order, some are given in the wrong order. But just for the easiness of discussing them in the webinar, because I'm not that multifunctional as Claire or David, who could simultaneously discuss the slides, look at the questions, and look at the answers. It is fantastic example of, you know, multifunctionality, like Julius Caesar. I'm not like that. That's why I simplified the task and put them all in the wrong order. So you can see that instead of this, which I don't want to repeat, in case you may remember it unconsciously, sick and sin would be the right one. Fame and fortune, touch and go, first and foremost, time and again, give and take, life and soul, flesh and blood, high and dry, black and white. So they are very common according to the corpus. They were not here because, you know, the authors of the course, Emmett Capel and Wendy Sharp, loved them. No, they are objectively common and expected to be encountered in reading and listening materials, or even used in candidates speaking. Some of them may be appropriate for writing, but you know that writing is more formal, so that, you know, some collocations may not be quite appropriate for writing. But for speaking, they are absolutely okay. And of course, what is important is not only know their meaning, but also put them in the right context in sentences. Then another example of phrase spot in another unit is read the expressions with the word right, and fit them into the gaps in sentences. In the right on time, the right way around, to be right under your nose, to make all the right noises, the film rights, as right as rain, to serve someone right, by rights, to be within your rights. Again, they are all given here in their correct form, but they have to be put in the gaps in the sentences. And just cramming them. Cramming is the word which Claire did not use, but I'm sure she meant it. To cram means to put things forcefully into the bag. And cramming means zubryozhka, though the metaphor is quite different from Russian zubryozhka. But you have to explain to your students that these are live forms. They are not artificial. They have not to be taken out of the bag just to surprise the board, the examiners. Besides these phrase boxes, there are other big and small boxes on corpus spots, mistakes revealed by learner corpus, idiom spots, idioms, have to be used, but very discriminately, again, according to the context and register, formal, semi-formal, or informal. Exam spots, that means some tactics of approaching a task, which are recommended, as David quoted, by the books. So we can listen to people like David, but it's a rare case. More frequently, we deal with books. And without books, there's no preparation for proficiency, believe me. I don't know a single person in Russia who has been brought up in Russia who, just without any preparation materials, jumped, registered for proficiency and got a good grade. Style extra, you know what style is, and this is not just a simple language error. There may be some stylistic inappropriacies, and exam advice. So there are exam tips, exam advice, exam spots. They are all different. I'm not showing you the examples just to save the time. Then there is downloadable software for objective proficiency, as I said. There's no online workbook there, which is a great shame and pity. I'm sure that in the next reiteration of objective proficiency or another course material for proficiency, there will be a properly designed digital or online workbook with online practice and online testing and automatically checked software. But if you go to this site, you download the interactive software to your computer for free. And this software includes exam skills practice, grammar and vocabulary exercises, answer keys, and recording scripts. So it can be support to the course book, which does not coincide, the tasks in which and the tests in which do not coincide with software activities. Now, this is what I've already shown. Haha. So, yes, I'm now passing on to another group of materials which are called examination papers. Why are Cambridge Proficiency examination papers unique? Yes, they are. Unlike practice tests, whatever publisher, a very beloved and respected one, can produce them, because you know they are endorsed by Cambridge English Assessment as official preparation materials, and you see similar stamps on the covers, each containing 4 complete examination papers. They provide the most authentic exam preparation and practice available, include an overview of the updated C2 Proficiency exam, an overview at the beginning of both objective proficiency course book and past papers is very important, because students must know every step of the exam, what every paper consists of, in what order they follow, and many other things which are included in a brief but very rich overview of the exam. Then they are published with or without answers. I suggest that adult people deserve with answers publications. They are not, lazy school children who may need materials without answers. We are not going to catch them unawares, or to catch them lazy, to catch them indiligent. That's their career. That depends on it very much so, because a lot of PhD programs would need the level of examination relevant to C2. And if they want to work or study internationally, this is a very important exam. Then they provide full-color visual materials for practicing in the speaking part, and they contain photocopiable answer sheets at the end that show how to transfer your answers to the answer sheets properly, because a lot of people are very careless and they make silly mistakes when transferring their answers. It's the same like in YEGA. Whatever hysterical sobbing may follow with a very good student who just missed the line and misplaced their answers when transferring them, nothing helps. You know, the grade will be absolutely objectively assessing the number of questions and the answers to them. Then, the main materials, so I'm approaching the end. This objective proficiency main course book, which I mentioned, which will contain easier exercises which lead people step by step to the necessary level. Then, for their very concrete practicing and, you know, kind of developing the habit of taking these tests, Proficiency 1 and Proficiency 2, which are just issues. They are not different in the content. Issue 1 and Issue 2, the collection of papers, the collection of authentic proficiency examination papers. And all but not forgotten small book, Common Mistakes at Proficiency, which contain you know, some wrong phrases or sentences crossed out by horizontal lines, followed by the exercises which help learners to get rid of these common mistakes. Now, what is very important is both Claire and David mentioned today, that you, a student or a candidate at the level of proficiency has to be full of the language expected from him or her, but not, you know, using these mental lists of words or phrases. They have to become familiar. They have to become internalized and habitual. Where do we get them? There is English vocabulary in use series, you know very well about, advanced. English collocations in use, advanced. English idioms in use, advanced. English phrasal verbs in use, advanced. You will never come across the same series of books with the proficiency word on the covers. But all the catalogs, both published paper catalogs and online catalogs, will indicate the levels covered by these books. It is C1 to C2 both. So, you know, these are very good materials, either used parallel to proficiency preparation materials or used before. If you are teaching students for C1, for example, you can start using these materials. I may say that according to my observations of my university students at the Faculty of Foreign Languages and Area Studies, their weakest point would be collocations. Because idioms, well, of course they are welcome in productive parts of the exam. They are indispensable in receptive part of the exam, but collocations is something we cannot get rid of, because every word collocates with one or many other words. And as David has shown, in many different ways, in many different meanings and contexts, which are based on anticipation and prediction. So how can you do it? Only using these materials, which have the same structure as Murphy's grammar book, but much more complex and communicative, when the collocations or idioms or phrasal verbs or vocabulary are on the left-hand side, presented with their definitions and examples, and activities, exercises are all on the right-hand side, and they are highly communicative. They are not just exemplifying the use of this idiom or collocation. They are taking them, they have taken them from the horse's mouth. From the horse's mouth, the idiom meaning from the real, authentic source. In my case, I mean here is Cambridge International Corpus of English. Then, in this slide, a natural question is answered. What dictionary do you need to prepare for C2 Proficiency? A fully updated edition of the best-selling Cambridge Advanced Learner's Dictionary, which includes up-to-date vocabulary, clear definitions, hundreds of pictures and illustrations, and a new focus on writing section. Informed by Cambridge International Corpus and correlated to English vocabulary profile, as I mentioned earlier, a research database, it is ideal for exam preparation and also features common mistake boxes to help learners avoid typical mistakes. You may realize, or you may guess, or you may know that if the exams belong to Cambridge University and if they are developed by Cambridge University, no other publisher can have access to these materials absolutely authentic. So the examiners can work at various universities in the world, including Russian universities. I know some Russian examiners who are examiners for proficiency. They are accredited by Cambridge. But, you know, still the materials to learn from are very much relevant to the exam. You cannot have anything published in Cambridge without an idea of an exam in mind for children or for adults. If you see the word learners on the cover of this dictionary, it doesn't mean that it is for children or students. It is for learners who are learning all their lives. Learners here means that it contains activities, exercises, common mistakes boxes, focus on writing section. So it is a teaching material apart from being a dictionary. Then, what do you need what do you need if you have not yet achieved C2 level? And this is a common case with many teachers of English, not only students or philology faculties or language faculties. Of course, you need the previous level. I don't recommend to be in a hurry and to jump from B2 to proficiency, thinking, okay, I've taken first B2 level exam, I know the formats, they are similar, I will just grab a proficiency course material and practice tests and I will be there. No, unfortunately, it doesn't happen so, because the gap between advanced and proficiency is big. And this gap, if you ask me, it may be my subjective view based on my long experience in the profession. This gap is caused by the frequency of the language selected for proficiency, unlike advanced and even more different from B2 first. The vocabulary is used, which is less frequent, less familiar to people who can talk fluently, who are students in an English-speaking country for a while, because this is a vocabulary which includes a vocabulary of fiction and a vocabulary of science. Thus, the level of proficiency is for more intellectually, cognitively developed adult people. Some of them may be younger, some of them may be older. They may treat the same topics in writing and speaking differently according to their maturity, intellectual development, and language development. But the level of C1 here, presented by the same course series, objective advanced, another course, objective called complete advanced, then advanced trainer, which is a fantastic series including 6 full exams supplied with exam tips, exam advice, and exam recommendations, and similar series of examination papers. So if you are thinking of proficiency, okay, keep this in mind, but use the previous level thoroughly to cover all the competences, then try and take the exam, and depending on the grade, if it is A, B, or C, you may think, okay, if it is C advanced, you may think, no, I'm not quite ready to go and check in for proficiency. I would rather take some time for preparation. And it would be better for you and your money, for your self-satisfaction, if you are sure that your proficiency will not be a failure, it will be a good C. If it is C at proficiency, I will say my congratulations, because there's no higher examination, and even C, which is not devalued troika, as we say in Russia. Troika is a replacement of dvoika. That is what we have done with our evaluation system in our country. But in Cambridge exams, A, B, and C are all good grades. If I'm wrong, Yulia will correct me. Now, the last page, my thanks. Thank you for your attention. Cambridge University Press in Moscow is open, if not, would be open if not for COVID. We are always inviting teachers to come, and we show the books, and sometimes we give books as samples, or give them for a while if we have very few of the books. But unfortunately now we are closed. This mail works, and your queries are redirected to one of the methodology consultants, me or my colleagues. Then these are two sites that you may have a look at the books and read more about them and their components. And my two emails, Cambridge.org is my office mail, which I also check at home and answer all the questions, and my personal email here, which is short and easy to remember. So thank you very much, and I really took less than 1 hour, but I am almost approached 6 p.m. Thank you, and have a nice evening. If you have any questions, I will see them in the chat box, and we'll try and answer. I see thanks, which is our traditional politeness. Very much, yes. Thank you as listeners for your patience and for your interest, for your curiosity, for your undying interest to the profession. I am just amazed by our colleagues all over the country, maybe all over the world, though I'm less familiar with, say, Argentinian teachers of English or Brazilian teachers of English. I guess that they are also very, very enthusiastic. And this is good, because even today, in this depressing time, we still have a chance to communicate. We still have a chance to develop professionally, thanks to organizations like Cambridge Assessment Moscow, which I'm also grateful to for inviting me to speak here today. Thank you. Right, I am ready to get switched off.
Ludmila Alexandrovna, thank you very much for joining us today. Very useful information about preparation materials from Cambridge University Press, official exam preparation materials. So the links, I will share the links in my follow-up email. So all the participants will receive the links to the website, email address, and all contact details of the representative office of Cambridge University Press here in Moscow. Dear friends, if you have any questions about preparation materials, please ask them in the questions section. There is a question from Regina. I passed CAE grade A a couple of years ago, and I teach students to pass C1 and B2. Do you think it's high time to go for C2? Why not?
A grade, right? It was the grade at CAE, grade A, yes, I see it. A couple of years ago. There was no break in professional activities within these 2 years. So I think that this colleague, Regina, can try proficiency. And I hope that as she is ambitious, as she is teaching the right, rather high levels of students, of course, why wasting your time? You will have a document which is relevant for almost the rest of your life, right? It is not just 1 year, 2 years as TOEFL or IELTS. It has no terms of expiry, and it will be taken into account by all employers and all educational programs. I don't know your age, but if you have problems not knowing what exam the organization will require, just write to them saying that you have CAEA and potentially proficiency with a certain grade, and many organizations will say, yes, of course. Yes, of course, you are the right candidate if all other conditions, other terms are met. Are there any plans to publish a proficiency trainer and possible to sign up the course if training given by you? No, I'm not giving any training courses because I'm teaching at Moscow State University as full-time professor and also work for Cambridge University Press as a methodology consultant. I have no time to give anything else as private classes or public classes or any additional programs. As for proficiency trainer, I would like to know very much, but unfortunately I don't have this information. Today we are in the period of expectations. You know, no publisher would be absolutely confident, as we might have been a year ago, that what will happen will happen. What we are planning will be carried out. Of course, we are trying best, and most of the plans are performed, are carried out. But I can't promise because I'm not a publisher myself. I work in Moscow. But if you write to Cambridge, they may take your request into account. If they have doubts, okay, you know what is the problem with publishing proficiency materials? The only problem is that the number of people taking proficiency and preparing for it in the world as compared to first or young learners exams is not so high. It is intuitively clear that the number of people speaking and writing and understanding English at the level of C2 is not that great. And for a big publisher, it is always an issue of, you know, investment, whether this investment will pay back. Okay, I'm not sure I see the questions. Do we take any certificate? Yeah, as participants of the webinar, Yulia?
Yes, all the participants will receive a certificate of attendance. I will share the certificates and the recording with you in a couple of days after the event. Yes, and there was a question about training. So yes, I would highly recommend you to contact our authorized exam centers. Most of them are language schools, and they provide really nice training for teachers and for students, preparation for C2 Proficiency. For example, our exam centers in Moscow, Language Link and BKC, David Morris is the representative of Language Link Moscow, and Claire Barnes worked for BKCIH Moscow. So they have very special courses for teachers, CPE for teachers, C2 Proficiency for teachers. Really great. So if you'd like to find out more, please contact our authorized exam centers or just visit their websites, BKCIH, Language Link, and other exam centers in Russia or, well, actually Armenia, Belarus, everywhere. Our exam centers provide some courses for teachers and learners. So,
How do I?
sorry, yeah, I'm here. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can go out, but I don't see the button.
Yes. So
If there are more questions, I'm not in a hurry. I don't know about the time allocated for the connection of the webinar.
Yeah, I cannot see any more question. One question again about the recording. So the recording will be sent to all the registered participants. So in a couple of days, you will receive the link to our YouTube channel where we usually publish all the recordings. So thanks a lot. Thank you for joining us today. I wish you good luck with your exam preparation. Register for the exam, receive your international certificate, and stand out from the crowd. I wish you good luck, stay safe, and thank you for visiting our online events. So now I'm closing the webinar room. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.